Gorton and then Congressman Roma.
There's a remarkable similarity in the written testimony that each of you have prepared in one respect that really stands out to me. And that is the response to particular challenges. And I sort of wrote them down in this fashion. You know, the first major challenge was the hijacker who wanted to go to Cuba. Transportation, you responded. The second, perhaps, was the hijacker who wanted money or to free prisoners, the Hezbollah type. And there was a response. A third one was explosives on board without the person who put the explosives on the plane. And certain steps were taken to meet with that. And the fourth and sort of incidental one was the disgruntled employee or former employee who wasn't subject to security. And he said, in each of these cases, there was a response with respect to rules. And I think as we look back on it, those responses were probably at least fairly adequate to meet the specific challenges at which they were aimed. But then what both of you said, I think quite accurately, was no one really conceived of the kind of challenge with which we were faced on 9/11, that you would have people who were perfectly willing to be suicidal to make a point, who were not hijacking an airplane to take it someplace, but to make a weapon out of it. And we have concentrated ever since 9/11 on how do we deal with that particular challenge. But the question that I have for each of you, if your imagination is broad enough, what's the next different challenge that we haven't thought about? At least thought about sufficiently. Has either of you, with your profession being in this, thought, well, this last one was very different from the predecessor. Is there another significant challenge out there that hasn't been used yet to aircraft safety and the safety of people on the ground?
I think that's one of the most difficult questions to answer.
Sure
is. Because I've thought a lot about this, particularly in relation to safety. When you're dealing with safety issues, and we've become much better at this with the improvement in technology, you can, and we're beginning. The FAA is beginning to do this very well, which is to track trends, to look at some incidents and see if you can track trends. It seems to me, but I'm not an intelligence expert, but it seems to me that's more challenging on the intelligence side when you are dealing with human nature. And when is it possible to think of every scenario? And I don't think it is, which is why I think we get back to layers and being not so predictable. I do think, as many have discussed, that while aviation is an important area, you certainly, as has been alluded to here, to get awfully concerned about other modes of transportation. And is there something within the other modes that would be equally as dramatic? And I think you could quickly come to some scenarios in those areas as well.
One area I would encourage the Commission to explore in depth, and I imagine you want to devote part of a closed hearing, closed session to this, is the area of cargo flying on passenger airliners. I think that is an area that, in my judgment, is not as mature, we might say, as is the handling of checked baggage, the passage of passengers through magnetometers and the like, and the use of explosive detection machines. I think cargo is an area that you should look at. Secondly, in the other modes, perhaps some of you caught this in the news, but the spokesman for the cruise industry was responding to an announcement by the Transportation Security Administration that there were going to have to be some screening of passengers on cruise lines. And I thought that the gentleman's comment was instructive and clearly up the lines of the question you asked. He said, well, we're quite different from the airlines. We're quite a different business. This type of thing will bring our industry to a halt. And who's going to pay for it? I have heard that before in the context of a different industry. But I do think that we have to think about other modes of transportation and the type of security we can afford, the type of security that's going to be provided. But you can almost see the drumbeat beginning in some of these other modes of transportation.